Hyunwoo stood in the waiting chamber outside the council hall and felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders like a heavy stone. The artificial gravity here was lighter than Earth normal, but his legs still felt like they might give out beneath him. Through the transparent walls, he could see the vast emptiness of space, dotted with distant stars that no longer seemed welcoming. So-min paced back and forth beside him, checking and rechecking her datapad, while Jin-ho leaned against the wall with his arms crossed and his face set in stone. The message had come 3 days ago through the quantum communication network that connected all civilized worlds. The Galactic Council required the immediate presence of all human representatives for an emergency session. No explanation was given, and no advance notice was provided. Hyunwoo had served as humanity's ambassador for 12 years, and he had never seen anything like this. Emergency sessions were called for wars or natural disasters that threatened entire star systems. What could possibly require such urgency? The chamber doors slid open with a soft hiss, and a Velkarin aide gestured for them to enter. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil. On water, its voice came through a translation device that hung around what might have been its neck. "The council will see you now," it said in words that sounded flat and emotionless. Hyunwoo straightened his formal diplomatic robes and walked forward. So-min fell into step beside him while Jin-ho brought up the rear. They had worked together for 5 years now, and each knew their role. Hyunwoo would speak for humanity. So-min would provide scientific data if needed. Jin-ho would assess any military implications, though none of them expected this to be about warfare. The council chamber was a massive dome of crystal that seemed to float in space itself. 12 raised platforms arranged in a circle, each held the representative of a different alien species. The Velkaran Primarch sat on the highest platform, its ancient form draped in robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. Below and to the right, the Tessek collective representative was actually 5 smaller beings that moved and spoke as one mind. The Zephyrian delegate floated in a tank of methane gas, while the rock-like Stonari representative needed no chair. At all, Hyunwoo had stood in this chamber many times before, but today felt different. The usual murmur of translated conversations was absent. Every representative stared directly at the 3 humans as they took their positions in the center of the circle. The silence stretched on until it became uncomfortable. The Primarch spoke first, and its voice echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. "Humans of Earth," it began. "This council has reached a decision regarding your species and your place in galactic civilization." Hyunwoo felt his stomach drop but kept his expression neutral. "We are honored to hear the wisdom of the council," he replied, using the formal words that protocol required. "There is no honor in what we must tell you," the Primarch continued. "After careful consideration and much debate, this council has voted to remove humanity from all galactic territories and restrict your species to your home system." The words hit Hyunwoo like a physical blow. He heard So-min gasp beside him and felt Jin-ho tense up behind him. This was worse than anything they had imagined. "May we ask what has brought the council to this decision?" Hyunwoo managed to keep his voice steady, though his heart was racing. Tessek Collective spoke next, and their 5 voices created an eerie harmony that made the translation devices struggle to keep up. "Your species has proven too dangerous to coexist with civilized races," they said. "Your unpredictable nature threatens the stability that has maintained peace for 1,000 years. What specific actions have we taken that warrant such extreme measures?" Hyunwoo asked. The Stonari representative spoke with a voice like grinding rocks. "Your colonies thrive in environments that kill other species. Your soldiers fight with reckless abandon that wins battles but defies all tactical logic. Your scientists solve problems in ways that make no sense to rational minds." So-min stepped forward with her datapad raised. "Honored council members, our medical research has saved millions of lives across dozens of species. Our agricultural techniques have ended famine on 17 worlds. Our engineering solutions have—" "Silence," the Primarch commanded, and So-min stopped speaking immediately. "We do not question your contributions. We question your methods and your motivations." The Zephyrian delegate spoke from within its methane tank, and its translated words bubbled strangely. "Humans adapt too quickly. You change too fast. You make other species feel inadequate, and this breeds resentment that could lead to war, Jin-Ho moved to stand beside Hyun-woo and spoke for the first time. With respect, honored representatives, you are making a mistake. Humanity has never started a war with any galactic species. We have served as peacekeepers and mediators. You miss the point, human soldier, the Primarch interrupted. War is not our only concern. Your species represents chaos in a universe that requires order. Your very existence disrupts the careful balance we have maintained. Hyun-woo looked around the circle of alien faces and saw something he had never seen before in all his years of diplomacy. It was not anger or hatred that he saw there. It was fear. These ancient civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for centuries were afraid of humanity. How long do we have? He asked quietly. 72 standard hours. The Primarch replied, all human colonies will be evacuated. All human ships will return to Earth. Your home system will be declared off-limits to all galactic traffic. Any human vessel found outside your system after the deadline will be destroyed. The chamber fell silent again. Hyun-woo could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. 72 hours to abandon everything humanity had built among the stars. 72 hours to say goodbye to friends and allies of other species. 72 hours to pack up an entire civilization and go home? Is there anything we can say or do to change your minds? Hyun-woo asked, though he already knew the answer. The vote was unanimous, the Primarch said. 12 species voted for your removal. 0 voted against. This decision is final. So-min tried once more. Our research stations are conducting experiments that could benefit. Your research will be continued by other species. The Tessa Collective said your facilities will be transferred to more suitable caretakers. That was when Hyun-woo realized they had no idea what they were doing. These alien species thought they could simply take over human innovations and continue as if nothing had changed. They had no understanding of how human creativity worked or why human solutions succeeded where others failed. Very well, Hyun-woo said with as much dignity as he could manage. Humanity will comply with your decision. We will return to Earth and leave you to your perfect order. Jin-Ho shot him a sharp look, but said nothing. So-min clutched her datapad tighter but remained silent. They all understood that arguing further would accomplish nothing. The Primarch seemed almost relieved. We do not take pleasure in this action, but we believe it is necessary for the greater good of galactic civilization. Your species will be remembered for its contributions. As they turned to leave the chamber, Hyun-woo spoke once more without looking back. When you corner a human, you get one of two responses. We either surrender completely, or we fight with everything we have. You should hope you have chosen the former. The 3 humans walked out of the chamber in silence, while 12 alien species watched them go. None of the council members understood the warning they had just received. They would learn soon enough what happened when you backed humanity into a corner. 3 months had passed since the council's verdict, and Earth's orbital shipyards had never been so busy. Du Young stood on the observation deck of the massive construction platform and watched hundreds of ships being loaded with the remnants of humanity's galactic presence. Cargo vessels that once carried trade goods between star systems now transported entire families fleeing their colonial homes. Military escorts that had protected peaceful exploration missions now shepherded refugees through hostile space. The evacuation was proceeding faster than anyone had thought possible, but it came at a terrible cost. Every day brought new reports of colonies being abandoned and research stations being shut down. Decades of human achievement among the stars was being packed into storage containers and shipped back to a home world that was rapidly running out of space for it all. Icha wiped sweat from her forehead as she supervised the dismantling of the fusion research facility on New Geneva. The reactor that had promised unlimited clean energy for the entire galaxy was being carefully disassembled piece by piece. Her team worked around the clock to ensure that every component was properly labeled and documented. The Velcaran technicians, who were supposed to take over the facility, watched the process with growing confusion. "Why are you taking that part?" asked the lead Velcaran engineer as Acha's crew loaded another crucial component onto a transport shuttle. "This is the quantum stabilizer array," Acha replied without stopping her work. Without it, the reactor cannot maintain stable fusion reactions. But the technical specifications show that the reactor can function with basic stabilization systems. The Velcaron protested Cha, paused and looked at the alien engineer with something that might have been pity. The specifications show the minimum requirements for basic operation. This array is what makes the reactor actually work efficiently. Without it, you will get maybe 10% of rated output before the whole system shuts down. The Velcaran looked alarmed. Then you must leave it behind. The Council has assigned this facility to our care. The Council ordered us to evacuate, Cha said firmly. They said nothing about leaving our property behind. This stabilizer was designed and built by human engineers using human research and human resources. It belongs to humanity. On Kepler's garden, halfway across the galaxy, Tai-Ho was having a similar conversation with Zephyrian agricultural specialists. The farming world had been transformed from a barren rock into a garden paradise through human terraforming techniques. Now the aliens who were taking over expected the transformation to continue without the people who had made it possible. These crop rotation schedules make no sense, complained the chief Zephyrian as he studied Tai-Ho's agricultural reports. Why do you plant nitrogen-fixing bacteria in Sector 7 when the soil analysis shows adequate nitrogen levels? Tai-Ho looked up. From the seed storage facility he was emptying, because the nitrogen levels will drop in 6 months when the current crop cycle depletes the soil. The bacteria take 4 months to establish themselves properly, so we plant them now to be ready when they are needed. But that is inefficient, the Zephyrian argued. Why not wait until nitrogen levels actually drop and then introduce the bacteria? Because by then it would be too late, Tai-Ho explained patiently. The crops would fail before the bacteria could restore soil fertility. You would lose an entire growing season, and the people depending on this food would starve. The Zephyrian made notes on his datapad, but Tai-Ho could see the confusion in his large compound eyes. The alien understood the mechanics of farming, but not the thinking behind it. He could follow the procedures, but he could not adapt them when conditions changed. Back at Earth, Du Young received constant updates from evacuation sites across the galaxy. The pattern was becoming clear with each report. The alien species taking over human facilities assumed they could simply continue operations using existing procedures and equipment. None of them seemed to understand that human innovations required human thinking to maintain and improve. The quantum communication network was the perfect example. Human technicians had built the relay stations that allowed instant communication across vast distances, but they had also continuously modified and upgraded the system to handle increasing traffic loads. The alien operators could send and receive messages, but they had no idea how to optimize signal routing or compensate for stellar interference. Chief Engineer Korak from the Stonari Collective contacted Du Young directly about the communication issues. Human Admiral, the message delays are becoming unacceptable. Our transmissions to the Outer Rim now take several minutes instead of seconds. Have you checked the relay stations in Sectors 12 through 18? Du Young asked. We have verified that all stations are operational according to specifications. Korak replied, operational according to specifications is not the same as operational according to need. Du Young explained, those relay stations need manual adjustment every few days to account for gravitational drift and solar wind variations. The specifications only cover basic operation. There was a long pause before Korak responded, how do we perform these manual adjustments? You would need to ask our technicians, Du Young said, but they are all being evacuated back to Earth. Stonari engineer made what might have been a frustrated sound. Can you leave detailed instructions for these procedures? Du Young almost smiled at that. The procedures change based on local conditions. What works in one system will not work in another. Your technicians would need to understand the underlying principles and adapt accordingly. Then explain the underlying principles. That would take several years of training, Du Young replied. And according to the Council's order, we have less than 30 days to complete our evacuation. The conversation ended abruptly after that, but Du Young knew it would not be the last such request. Across the galaxy, alien species were discovering that taking over human operations was not as simple as they had assumed. On the mining world of Titan Spear, Jinho oversaw the evacuation of the last human military base in that sector. The Tesek, Collective had insisted on examining all human military equipment before it was removed. What they found confused them greatly. "These weapon systems are unnecessarily complex," observed the TESIC military analyst. "Your energy rifles use 17 different components when our designs accomplish the same function with 8. Jin-Ho nodded as he supervised the loading of the weapons onto transport ships. "Our rifles also have 3 times the range, twice the power output, and require maintenance only once per month instead of once per week. How is this possible with such complex design?" "The complexity serves a purpose," Jin-Ho explained. "Each component has multiple functions, and they work together in ways that simple designs cannot achieve. Your 8-component rifle does one job adequately. Our 17-component rifle does that job excellently, plus several others you have not thought of." The TESIC analyst studied the weapon specifications more carefully. "We do not understand how these multiple functions interact." "That is because you approach design problems differently than humans do," Jin-Ho said. "You optimize for simplicity and predictability. We optimize for adaptability and performance." As the final evacuation ships prepared to depart human-controlled space, a strange thing began to happen. Alien officials who had been eager to take over human facilities started requesting extensions to the evacuation deadline. They wanted more time to learn human procedures and understand human systems. The requests all came too late. The Council had been very clear about the 72-hour deadline, and they refused to grant any extensions. Humanity would leave on schedule, and the alien species would figure out how to maintain human innovations on their own. Du Young stood on the bridge of his flagship as the last human ships gathered at the edge of Earth's solar system. Behind them lay everything humanity had built among the stars. Ahead lay an uncertain future, trapped in a single star system, while the rest of the galaxy moved on without them. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving final requests from 17 different worlds asking us to leave technical specialists behind to assist with transitions." "Denied," Du Young replied without hesitation. "All humans return to Earth as ordered by the Council, as the massive fleet made its final jump to Earth space." Du Young wondered how long it would take for the aliens to realize what they had lost. Human innovation was not just about the machines and systems humanity had built. It was about the minds that could adapt and improve and solve problems that no one had anticipated. The galaxy had wanted humans gone because they changed things too, quickly, and thought in ways that made other species uncomfortable. Now they would learn what the galaxy looked like without that change, and that thinking Du Young suspected they would not like what they discovered. 6 months after the last human ship had vanished into Earth's solar system, Veltar stood in the central command center of SciFiPrime and stared at reports that made no sense. The atmospheric processors on 17 colony worlds were showing decreased efficiency ratings. The terraforming equipment that had maintained perfect environmental conditions for decades was slowly failing. The problems had started small, a slight increase in atmospheric pressure here and a minor temperature fluctuation there. Nothing that seemed immediately dangerous, but enough to trigger monitoring alerts. Veltar had initially dismissed these issues as normal wear and tear that would be resolved through routine maintenance. That was 6 months ago. Now the problems were getting worse. "Status report on colony designation VK7739, Veltar requested, from his aide. The younger Velkaron consulted his data tablet with 4 hands, moving rapidly across the interface. "Atmospheric pressure has increased by 2% over standard parameters. Oxygen levels are fluctuating between acceptable and borderline toxic. The main processor is operating at 67% efficiency and declining. Have the local technicians implemented the standard correction procedures?" "Yes, Administrator. All standard procedures have been followed precisely. The equipment continues to degrade despite maintenance." Veltar felt a familiar sensation in his primary stomach that humans would have recognized as worry. The Velkaron Empire had taken over the atmospheric processing systems from human colonies with confidence that their superior technical knowledge would improve efficiency. Instead, they were watching the systems slowly fail, contact the technical archives, and retrieve all human documentation regarding atmospheric processor maintenance. Veltar ordered. His aide hesitated before responding. "Administrator, We have already reviewed all available human documentation. The procedures we are following match their specifications exactly. Then why are the systems failing? Unknown. Administrator. The human documentation appears to be incomplete, halfway across the galaxy. Collective Node 7 was processing similar data with growing alarm. The Tessic Collective had prided itself on logical thinking and systematic problem-solving, but the navigation systems on their fleet ships were developing issues that defied logical explanation. The quantum compass arrays that guided ships through hyperspace were becoming increasingly unreliable. Course calculations that should have been simple were producing conflicting results. Ships that departed for routine supply runs were arriving days late with reports of getting lost in hyperspace. Analysis of navigation failures. Node 7 requested, from the collective consciousness quantum compass arrays showing degraded accuracy in 73% of fleet vessels, came the response from multiple nodes working in harmony. Calibration procedures as documented by human technicians have been implemented correctly, but do not restore full functionality. Explanation for continued degradation. Unknown. Human documentation describes maintenance procedures but does not explain underlying principles of quantum compass operation. Our technicians can follow the procedures but cannot adapt them when unexpected variables occur. Node 7 shared this information with the greater collective and felt a ripple of unease pass through the hive mind. The Tessic had assumed that their logical approach to problem-solving would easily surpass human methods. They were discovering that logic alone was not sufficient when the problems had been solved through intuition and creativity on the trade. World of Commerce Station Zeta Minister Keth floated in his methane tank and watched economic reports that showed a galaxy sliding toward chaos. The interstellar trade network that had operated smoothly for centuries was beginning to fragment as shipping routes became unreliable and communication delays increased. The logistical algorithms that managed cargo routing between thousands of star systems had been designed by human mathematicians who understood both the technical requirements and the practical realities of interstellar commerce. The Zephyrian analysts who took over the system could read the algorithms, but they could not modify them when circumstances changed. Current status of trade route Gamma 77. Keth bubbled into his communication system, route showing significant delays. His economic advisor responded, average shipping time has increased from 12 standard days to 19 standard days over the past 4 months. Cause of delays? Multiple factors, Minister. Communication lag between way station results in poor cargo coordination. Navigation errors cause ships to miss optimal transit windows. Port facilities are operating below efficiency due to equipment malfunctions. Each problem seemed small by itself, but together they were creating a cascade effect that was disrupting commerce throughout the galaxy. Keth had contacted other trade ministers and learned that similar problems were occurring everywhere. Have we implemented the efficiency improvements developed by human economists? Keth asked. We have attempted to do so, Minister, but the improvements require real-time adjustments based on changing conditions. Our economists can calculate optimal routes for static scenarios, but struggle to adapt when variables change unexpectedly. The Zephyrian economic models were based on predictable patterns and stable conditions. Human economic thinking had assumed that conditions would always be changing and had built adaptability into every system. 3 months later, the problems had become impossible to ignore. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council were being called monthly to address the growing crisis, but none of the member species could offer effective solutions. The Velcaran colonies were struggling with environmental systems that no longer maintained optimal conditions. Several worlds had been evacuated when atmospheric processors failed completely, and no one could repair them. The technical specifications left by human engineers described what to do, but not how to think about the problems. The Tessic Collective had lost 6 ships in hyperspace when navigation systems failed during routine journeys. The missing vessels had simply vanished without any distress signals or trace of their fate. The quantum compass technology that humans had developed was proving impossible to maintain without human intuition about how quantum mechanics actually worked. Trade between star systems had slowed to a crawl as the logistical network that managed interstellar commerce began to break down. Cargo shipments that once took days now took weeks. Critical supplies were trapped in warehouses because no one could figure out how to optimize the routing algorithms for current conditions. Minister Keth found himself in emergency session with economic leaders from across the galaxy trying to solve problems that seemed to have no logical solutions. The human economic models assumed constant change and adaptation, reported the chief economist for the Draxian Republic. Our models assume stability and predictable growth patterns. When conditions change, our systems cannot respond effectively. Then we must develop new economic models, Keth suggested. We have attempted to do so, Minister, but we discover that we do not think about economics the way humans did. They approached trade as a dynamic system that required constant adjustment. We approach it as a mechanical system that should operate according to fixed rules. The difference was becoming clear across every area where humans had contributed to galactic civilization. Human innovations worked not just because of superior technology, but because of different ways of thinking about problems. When alien species tried to maintain human systems using their own thought processes, the systems slowly degraded and failed on HFY. The collective consciousness, was struggling with a realization that challenged their fundamental understanding of logic and efficiency. Human systems appear to require human thought patterns to function optimally. Node Prime reported to the greater collective, "Our attempts to improve upon human designs have consistently resulted in decreased performance. Analysis suggests that human unpredictability was not a flaw in their thinking, but a feature of their problem-solving methods." Node 7 added, "They designed systems to be adaptable because they expected conditions to change in unexpected ways." The collective had always valued order and predictability above all else. They were learning that sometimes chaos and adaptability were more valuable than perfect order. By the end of the first year after humanity's exile, the galaxy was facing shortages of food, medical supplies, and basic manufactured goods. The efficient, interstellar civilization that had existed for centuries was slowly collapsing because it had been dependent on human innovation in ways that no one had understood. The council members who had voted unanimously to expel humanity were beginning to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late to simply admit their error and ask humans to return. The galaxy would have to collapse a little further before pride would allow them to swallow their words. 2 years after humanity's exile, Primarch Zevlon stood in the emergency session chamber and looked at reports that showed a galaxy in crisis. 37 colony worlds had been abandoned when their life support systems failed. The Tessek Collective had lost contact with entire sectors of their territory. The trade network that had connected thousands of worlds was now operating at less than 40% capacity. The proud Velkaran Empire that had ruled star systems for millennia was watching its colonial infrastructure crumble. Worlds that had been terraformed into garden paradises were reverting to hostile environments as atmospheric processors failed one by one. The technical manuals left behind by human engineers might as well have been written in ancient hieroglyphs. For all the good they did, status report on critical systems across all member territories. Zevlon commanded with a voice that betrayed none of the fear growing in his heart. Administrator Veltar approached the speaking platform with data that painted a picture of systematic collapse. Honored Primarch life support failures have forced evacuation of 12 more worlds this month. Agricultural output is down 67% from pre-Exodus levels. Interstellar communication is experiencing delays of up to 72 hours between major hub systems. Each statistic felt like a physical blow to Zevlon. The Velkaran species had survived ice ages and stellar catastrophes by adapting and overcoming challenges through superior technology and careful planning. But this crisis was different because it was not caused by external forces or natural disasters. They had done this to themselves. Have our best engineers made any progress? Understanding human technical documentation, our engineers can follow human procedures precisely, honored Primarch. But they cannot adapt those procedures when conditions change. Human systems appear to have been designed with the assumption that constant modification would be necessary. The Zephyrian trade minister floated in his portable methane tank and added his own grim assessment. Honored council members, the economic situation continues to deteriorate. Food shortages are beginning to affect core worlds that have not experienced hunger in living memory. Medical supplies are trapped in distribution centers because our logistical systems cannot efficiently route deliveries. Collective Prime spoke, through its representative with a voice that harmonized with itself in eerie patterns. The Tessek consciousness has reached a disturbing conclusion. Human unpredictability was not a weakness to be corrected, but a strength to be utilized. We believed their chaos would disrupt our order, but we now understand that their chaos was what allowed complex systems to function in an imperfect universe. The admission sent ripples of unease through the assembled representatives. The TESEC collective had always prided itself on logical thinking and systematic approaches to problem solving. For them to acknowledge that chaos could be superior to order was like admitting that their fundamental understanding of the universe was flawed. Zevlon felt the weight of leadership pressing down upon him like the gravity of a collapsed star. He had been one of the strongest voices advocating for humanity's removal from galactic society. His speeches about the need for order and predictability had swayed other council members to vote for exile. Now his own empire was collapsing because of that decision. "Have we received any communication from Earth since the embargo began?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, honored Primarch. The humans have respected the quarantine completely. No ships have left their system, and no messages have been transmitted outside Earth space." That was perhaps the most troubling aspect of the entire situation. The Council had expected humans to attempt contact to argue for their return or to offer assistance with the growing problems. Instead, there had been complete silence. Humanity was either respecting the exile completely, or they were planning something that the Council could not predict. The Stonari representative spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "Our mining operations have experienced catastrophic failures in 17 locations. The extraction equipment that humans designed requires constant adjustment for optimal efficiency. Our operators can run the machines but cannot modify operations when ore deposits shift or geological conditions change." "How severe are these failures?" Zevlon asked. "Production is down 83% from pre-Exodus levels. Several mines have been abandoned completely when equipment failures made extraction impossible." The numbers kept getting worse with each report. Every sector of galactic civilization that had benefited from human innovation was now struggling or failing completely. The efficiency gains that had allowed the galaxy to support trillions of beings across thousands of worlds were disappearing as human-designed systems degraded without proper maintenance. Minister Keth bubbled urgently from his methane tank. "Honored Council, we must consider the unthinkable option. The collapse is accelerating, and our attempts to solve these problems independently are failing. Perhaps it is time to approach Earth about resuming diplomatic relations." The chamber fell silent at the suggestion. The very idea of admitting failure and asking for help from the species they had exiled was almost too shameful to consider. But the alternative was watching galactic civilization collapse completely. The Council voted unanimously for exile. Zevlon replied carefully. "Any reversal of that decision would require another unanimous vote." "Then let us vote," urged the Draxian. "Representative, how many more worlds must we lose before pride becomes secondary to survival?" But Zevlon knew that such a vote would be premature. Several council members still believed that the current problems were temporary setbacks that could be solved with enough time and effort. They were not yet desperate enough to swallow their pride and admit that they needed humanity 3 more. Months passed before the crisis reached a point where even the most stubborn council members could no longer deny reality. The Goldani Federation lost its capital world when the planetary shield generators failed during a solar storm. The Aquatic Alliance watched helplessly as their deep-sea mining platforms shut down one by one. Food riots broke out on 17 worlds as agricultural systems continued to fail. It was Collective Prime who finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say, "We need the humans back." The simple statement hung in the air like a confession of guilt. Every representative in the chamber knew it was true, but saying it out loud made their failure real and undeniable. "The question is whether they will be willing to return," added Minister Keth. "We have given them no reason to trust us or help us. They might choose to let us solve our own problems." Zevlon had been thinking about this possibility for months. Humans were known for their capacity for both forgiveness and revenge. Which response would they choose when approached by the same council that had voted to exile them? "There is only one way to find out," he said finally. "We must send an emissary to Earth." The vote was not unanimous this time. 3 council members still believed that approaching Earth would be seen as a sign of weakness that might encourage other species to challenge council authority. but 9 votes were enough to authorize the mission. Ambassador Nix was chosen for his diplomatic skills and his previous positive interactions with human representatives. His ship would carry the most advanced communication equipment available to ensure that any response from Earth could be transmitted immediately back to the Council. As Nix's vessel prepared to depart for Earth space, Zevlon wondered what they would find there. Had humanity spent the past 2 years planning revenge against the galaxy that had rejected them, or had they simply moved on to build a better life within their own solar system? The answer to that question would determine whether galactic civilization could be saved, or whether it would continue its slow collapse into chaos. But first they had to swallow their pride and ask for help from the species they had foolishly believed they could live without. Ambassador Nix approached Earth's solar system with growing amazement at what his sensors were detecting. The human homeworld that the Council had expected to find isolated and struggling was instead buzzing with activity that seemed impossible for a single star system. Massive orbital structures that had not existed 3 years ago now surrounded the planet like a technological ring. Ships of designs he had never seen before moved between the structures with purpose and efficiency. When his vessel reached the edge of human space, it was immediately intercepted by a patrol ship that was sleek and advanced beyond anything the Council had in their fleets. The human voice that contacted him was polite but firm. "Ambassador Nix, you are entering restricted space. State your business and prepare to be escorted to the designated meeting area." Nix transmitted his diplomatic credentials and waited. The response came faster than he had expected. "Your credentials have been verified, Ambassador. Follow the designated flight path to Earth Orbital Station. Any deviation from the assigned route will result in immediate escort back to the system boundary." As his ship was guided toward Earth, Nix observed the incredible transformation that had taken place in just 3 years. The orbital platforms he could see were clearly manufacturing facilities, but they were producing goods on a scale that seemed impossible. Ships were being constructed at a rate that defied belief. Most shocking of all, the technology he observed was clearly more advanced than anything the Council possessed. When his ship docked at the orbital station, Nix was met by a human woman who introduced herself as President Lee. He recognized her immediately as So Min, the former scientific advisor who had tried to present data defending humanity during the exile hearings. She had been young then, but now she carried herself with the authority and wisdom of a leader who had guided her people through crisis. "Welcome to Earth space. Ambassador Nix," she said with perfect diplomatic courtesy. "I assume you are here to discuss the current situation in Council territory. President Leatherim come bearing a message from the Galactic Council." Nix began carefully. "The Council wishes to explore the possibility of resuming diplomatic relations with humanity." They walked through corridors that hummed with energy and activity. Humans moved with confidence and purpose that spoke of a society that had not merely survived exile but had thrived because of it. The technology Nix observed was unlike anything he had seen before. "The Council wishes to resume relations," President Lee repeated thoughtfully. "May I ask what has prompted this change of heart?" Nix had prepared for this question, but found it difficult to answer without losing all diplomatic dignity. "There have been certain technical difficulties in maintaining systems that were previously operated by human personnel." "Technical difficulties?" President Lee stopped walking and turned to face him. "Ambassador, let me be direct. We know exactly what is happening in Council space. Our long-range sensors have been monitoring the collapse of galactic infrastructure for 2 years. We know about the colony evacuations and the failed agricultural systems and the ships lost in hyperspace." The bluntness of her statement caught Nix off guard. "If you have been monitoring the situation, then you understand the urgency of resolving these difficulties." "Oh, we understand the urgency perfectly." President Lee resumed walking. "The question is whether humanity has any interest in resolving difficulties created by the Council's own short-sightedness." They entered a conference room, where Admiral Park and Dr. Wu were waiting. Nix recognized them as Jinho and Taeho from the original exile hearings, but like President Lee, they had been transformed by their experiences. They radiated confidence and competence that spoke of people who had overcome enormous challenges. "Ambassador Nix." Admiral Park greeted him with military precision. "I trust your journey was uneventful." "Thank you, Admiral. I am here to discuss terms for humanity's return to galactic society." Dr. Wu leaned forward with interest. Return to galactic society, he repeated. That is an interesting phrase. It assumes that humanity wishes to return to a society that unanimously voted to exile us. Surely you understand that the exile was a regrettable mistake, Nix protested. The Council now recognizes that humanity's contributions were more valuable than initially assessed. President Lee activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. Colony worlds marked in red indicated failed systems. Trade routes showed massive delays and disruptions. Agricultural worlds displayed production figures that were catastrophically low. This is what the galaxy looks like without human innovation, she said calmly. Agricultural systems designed for adaptability being operated by species that value rigid procedures. Navigation technology that requires intuitive adjustment being maintained by logical minds that cannot think outside programmed parameters. Economic models that assume constant change being managed by cultures that prefer stability. Yes, exactly, Nix said eagerly. These problems could be resolved if humanity returned to assist with system maintenance and optimization. Could be resolved, Admiral Park repeated, assuming humanity chooses to help clean up the mess created by the Council's decision. The tone of the conversation was not going as Nix had hoped. He had expected humanity to be eager to return to galactic society. Instead, they seemed to be evaluating whether galactic society was worth returning to. What would humanity require in exchange for resuming participation in galactic civilization? Nix asked. President Lee exchanged glances with her advisors before responding. The terms would need to reflect the new reality, Ambassador. Humanity is no longer the junior partner seeking acceptance from established galactic powers. We have spent 3 years developing our technology and capabilities without Council restrictions or oversight. Dr. Wu activated another display showing human technological achievements since the exile. We have solved energy production problems that the Council thought were impossible. Our manufacturing efficiency has increased by 400%. Our ships can travel faster and farther than anything in the Council fleet. We have also learned to think about problems differently, Admiral Park added. Without the need to accommodate Council preferences for order and predictability, we have been free to pursue truly innovative solutions. Nix studied the displays with growing alarm. The technology humanity had developed was clearly superior to anything the Council possessed. If they chose to remain isolated, they could easily defend themselves against any attempt to force their cooperation. What specific terms would humanity propose? He asked. President Lee presented a document that had clearly been prepared in advance. Full voting rights in Council decisions with veto power over any measures that affect human interests. Recognition of human territorial claims, including all systems currently under Earth administration. Technology sharing agreements that respect human intellectual property rights. The terms were harsh, but fair given the circumstances. Nix had been authorized to agree to almost any reasonable demands, but he needed to test how committed humanity was to these specific requirements. The Council might find some of these terms difficult to accept, he said carefully. Then the Council can continue trying to solve their problems without human assistance. President Lee replied with no trace of emotion. We are not desperate to return, Ambassador. We have built a good life within our own territory. Admiral Park leaned back in his chair and smiled grimly. The Council wanted us gone because they feared our unpredictability. Now they need us back because of it. The irony is not lost on us. The galaxy has learned an expensive lesson about the value of diversity and adaptability, Dr. Wu added. The question is whether they have learned it well enough to accept humanity as true equals rather than useful servants. Nix realized that humanity held all the negotiating advantages. They had the technology and skills needed to save galactic civilization, but they also had the option of simply watching it collapse from a safe distance. The Council needed them far more than they needed the Council. I will transmit your terms to the Council for consideration, he said formally. Take your time, Ambassador. President Lee replied, we are in no hurry. The longer the Council waits, the more expensive the eventual reconstruction will become. As Nix prepared to depart, he asked one final question. What if the Council chooses to reject these terms and attempt to solve their problems independently? Admiral Park answered with a smile. That was not entirely friendly. Then we wish them the best of luck. After 3 years of watching galactic civilization collapse, we have become quite comfortable with the idea of building our own future. Ambassador Nix returned to Council space carrying terms that would transform the balance of galactic power. Humanity was no longer asking to be accepted back into galactic society. They were demanding to be accepted as equals. The Council would have to decide whether their pride was worth more than their survival.